It's Tuesday night, 8 o'clock, and this is the Bob Leonard Show. And like we tell you every week, we take the stories you've been reading about in the newspaper and watching on television, provided to you by the mainstream press, and we put our spin on it. We kind of go behind the story to tell you what's really involved here. You know, it's our interpretation of the mainstream's story, and you know, like we tell you every week, you can accept or reject it, but you know, we try to give you the story behind the story. Now, this program will be repeated tomorrow night, Wednesday night, from 11 to 12, and then it's ongoing on a regular basis on your internet. If you miss it here or miss it tomorrow night, or it's too late to watch it tomorrow night, you can see it on flinttalk.com. Just punch that in on your computer, and that show and a number of other ones that have been published in the past, you can also choose if you want to. So this show again will be seen tomorrow night at 11 to 12 and on the flinttalk.com. So you're welcome to tune in. We have a number of stories we want to get to tonight. One concerns the story that's on the front page of the Journal today, Tuesday. County holds off uproar over senior tax. Now, you might remember when this thing first came up last spring, we had serious reservations about it because there was no rules and regulations to tell us what was going to be, how this money was going to be spent, and as a result, this program, we opposed it when it was being presented to the public in a vote on in August, in the August primary. And you know, as it turned out, I think we were right, because this thing is falling apart. And you know, hopefully we'll get it back together and get proper use of the money for the senior citizens, but we'll wait and see. But you know, really what's happened here now, it appears that the ripoff of the senior citizens millage by the politicians and the self-servers has really begun. You know, just yesterday, the politicians on the county commission had a special meeting, and they seem to be surrendering to the political pressure from the out-of-county politicians. These are the politicians representing communities that provide a senior citizen, and they agreed, apparently, in principle, that they will be able to reduce the requirement that they give the same support to the senior citizen centers that they've been giving, and they reduce it from 100%, and it looks like they're going to ask for only 50%. Now, these commissioners seem to be leaning towards using the senior citizens millage money to make up for this planned senior citizen financial shortfall. Now, previously, the Metropolitan Planning Commission, this is the county's coordinating agency for establishing rules for the distribution of the millage, they recommended that the senior citizen centers that are in operation now, 16 of them, that they continue to contribute 100% of what they're already contributing to get the money, the new money from the senior citizen millage. Now, this way, you know, the Planning Commission reasoned that this would give more money, more of the millage money to the senior citizens' needs like nutritional, shelter, health care. And that seems logical. Now, here's a editorial that the Flint Journal wrote here a while back concerning this problem that I'm talking to you about now. It says this. It says, spending senior citizens tax. And this was, well, it wasn't too long ago, about a week ago. It says, poor initial planning for spending revenue for Genesee County new senior citizens tax is still causing the Board of Commissioners political grief. We told you about that when we were opposing this millage at that time. Now, we didn't oppose it as a principle. We opposed it at that time because they hadn't developed any standards or rules or regulations. But to be fair, the Journal's editorial goes on to say, the bad feeling being expressed in places like Richfield Township are not all the commissioner's fault. Local government and senior citizens officials and their patrons have contributed to the discord by making false claims on this money, either through misunderstanding or wishful thinking. Then it goes on to say, the Metropolitan Planning Commission seems to be prescribing ably, such as requiring the local units not reduce the support they've given their centers now. In other words, continue the 100% funding of those centers. Goes on to say, through the senior facilities will be the focus of the services. They nonetheless will have to compete with senior funds, tax funding annually with other agencies. As a result, there's a better chance that the new money will go where it belongs, because there's some serious question now, by just funding the senior citizen centers, whether it'll go where it belongs. Because, as the editorial continues to say, they're concerned that whether it'll go where it belongs for deserving programs that can best serve the county's 70,000 people of 60 or older. And then it goes on to say, as we've said the last 3 or 4 weeks we've been talking about this program, most of them, that is the senior citizens, don't even visit the senior centers now, which means untold nutritional, shelter, and health care deficiencies are unknown, let alone addressed. And then this young woman from the Crapo Senior Citizen on Mount Morris Township, Gail Reed, was quoted as saying, what we are trying to emphasize is it's not just the centers, it's having home care. It's a respite care. It's having somebody to mow the lawn. This is not a senior citizen millage. It's a senior service millage. And this was one of our concerns at that time. Now, here we come to this, just yesterday. And you have to ask, why should senior millage money be used kind of as a kickback to local government, get them to approve or to get their approval of the county commission plan? Hey, the rule should be, if anyone doesn't, agree with the ruling that the local senior citizen centers already operating should continue to contribute 100%, they'll just have to do without the 151,000 the County Board of Commissioners agreed to give each senior citizen if they'd go with this 100% plan. Now they're wavering. But anyway, here's some of the things that our good friend Ron Fonger, who wrote this story, and does such a great job on these stories, what's going on in the county government. It says this: starts out 24 townships and city officials, some angry with the county's handling of the new senior citizens millage, that is, they're not getting what they want, went into a meeting Monday talking about drastic measures, including repealing the tax. You know, that's not going to happen because they're going to benefit a lot from it. And, you know, their employees and everything will benefit, in my opinion, with higher salaries and everything. Now, here's what County Chairman, Commission Chairman Archie Bailey, he's proposing that local communities be allowed to spend less than last year, a recent development that requires a vote of the full board. So they're going to have to come back and vote on that. Then Fogler goes on to say, last month the County Commission, Board of Commissioners, committed to spend up to $2.4 million at as many as 15 centers. But the rules the board attached, including restricting spending on new construction and a requirement that communities continue to spend as much as they have previously to support the centers, frustrated local officials. Commissioners have said they want the new millage to improve, not just maintain service. And that's why they wanted 100%. County Board Chairman Archie Bailey has floated a new proposal after they unanimously adopted the other proposal that required the 100% funding of the centers by the local government to continue. County Chairman Archie Bailey has floated a new proposal. The local municipalities at least continue to spend half as much as they did in previous years on senior services. They've already sold out. This is a sellout. The plan received the support of the County Senior Citizens Advisory Committee on Monday. The committee makes recommendations to the commissioners. So it's pretty clear the commissioners will probably buy into it. A Flint Township trustee, Roger Powell, said this: with all the problems of this millage, if it came up again, it could be voted down. Now, all I can say about that is, if you're paying attention to our program last May and June when this matter was coming up and we were opposing it, those are the things we said. These problems will exist, they'll flourish, they'll balloon, and that's what's happened. You know, the 100% continuing contribution, established, as I say, by the board 3 weeks ago at a county commission meeting, and it was established by resolution, which at that time had unanimous support of the county commissioners. So why are they changing now? Since 3 weeks ago till yesterday, the politicians have changed their mind, apparently. You know, the out-county people primarily seem to be getting their way at the expense of the senior citizen tax money. You take 50% from the senior citizens centers being contributed by local government, that means that the senior citizens tax money have to make that up. This money that the local government is saving now will go to the general fund. Don't tell them where it will be spent, but I'm sure it won't be spent on the senior citizens. You know, I have an impression from watching government for a long time. When a local government agency gets funds they didn't expect, it's usually spent on things that, if they ask for the public to support, they wouldn't support it, like higher wages, better benefits, more conferences to exotic places. You know, was this what the senior citizens millage was supposed to pay for? I think the idea of requiring the senior citizen centers, the 16 of them that exist today, should continue to support the senior citizens at 100% of what they were supporting it. And then the additional money coming in would be used to increase that support and help for senior citizens. Now, if they adopt this 50% okay deal, that means 50% of the taxpayers' senior citizen millage will be going to something to support the taking of 50% by local government for whatever purpose. And I don't think that's right. We said it was going to happen. It did happen. Here's another train wreck in the process. Have you been paying attention to the city of Burton's bribery trial being heard now in federal court? What a circus that trial is turning into. Here we have these politicians jumping through hoops to try to extricate themselves from any appearance of involvement in any of this wrongdoing. In my opinion, their outrageous explanations of their uninvolvement implicates them even more. You know, presently Charles Abbey, the city's public works director, is the only one charged. I'm just saying at this time. Abbey is on trial on 2 charges of bribery and 1 count of extortion for accepting a subdivision lot in 2002 from land developer Blake Rizzo for free. Rizzo testified he gave Abbey a lot for favors in processing his land development projects he had in front of the city of Burton. And one of them was this Pebble Creek subdivision, which you're hearing a lot about in this trial. And let me show you Channel 12's report on this that gives you a little flavor of what's going on here. Can you play that, please?
Center stage at the bribery and extortion trial of a Burton city official. Department of Public Works Director Charles Abbey is accused of taking land from developer Blake Rizzo in exchange for political favors. ABC 12's Taryn Asher has been following this trial. She joins us live with the latest. Hi, Taryn.
Hi, ABC. Developer Blake Rizzo, who is considered the prosecution's star witness, took the stand today. Rizzo testified he gave Burton City Administrator Charles Abbey a piece of property in the Maplewood Meadow subdivision in exchange for continued support when it came to his developments. Rizzo claims he gave this land to Abbey for free and covered up the transaction by first deeding the property to his secretary and eventually transferring it to Abbey. Abbey's attorney, Charles Grossman, disagreed and told the jury during opening statements yesterday Abbey paid nearly $23,000 for the lot through a quitclaim deed. Rizzo says Abbey never paid for the land, which was worth around $20,000. Meantime, today, Grossman called Rizzo's credibility into question since Art Bush, the prosecutor at the time, gave Rizzo a significant plea deal for his testimony against Abbey and several other Genesee County officials. Rizzo claims he bribed in exchange for favorable treatment. Rizzo told the jury he not only gave Abbey a free lot, he also bribed current Burton Mayor Charles Smiley, Genesee County Drain Commissioner Jeff Wright, and former Burton City Councilman Bob Santilli with at least $5,000 in cash.
Now, as I mentioned to you early in the report, the explanation by some of these witnesses on their effort to absolve themselves reaches a level of absurdity. A case in point, let's look at Burton Mayor Charles Smiley ducking and dodging when he was testifying about the money Rizzo says he gave Smiley over the years to grease the skids to get his projects through the city's Burton bureaucracy. Here's the Flint Journal's report this past Friday on Smiley says Rizzo money was to help needy woman. He's talking about some money that he had received. It says Burton Blake Rizzo, former secretary, said she delivered an envelope stuffed with $300 to Mayor Charles Smiley, who was standing on a street corner waiting for the cash. But Smiley said the money went to a good cause. He said he was using it to help some needy person pay her bills. And then today, apparently, he had some woman come in, terrified, testifying that that must have been the occasion he paid my bill. And she doesn't know whether or not it was. But anyway, it says this. Smiley says, Blake called me up and said to take $300 in cash to Charles Smiley. This is the secretary talking. I met him on the corner of Maple and Genesee, Spangler told the jury in district court in Flint. She said she and Smiley didn't talk, but she rolled down her window and handed him the envelope. The delivery happened when Spangler worked for Rizzo in the early 2000s. Then it goes on to say, this whole thing this is Smiley saying, testifying. This whole thing makes it sound like I've done something wrong, and I haven't. That's gospel, he said. He imposed the gospel, which is typical of him. And then it says Abby's on trial for these two counts that I mentioned to you. Then it goes on to say, Smiley, who was not charged with any crimes, said he wouldn't reveal to the Flint Journal who the woman was that he and Rizzo helped. Now, they knew that was devastating to Smiley. So he came up with this so-called witness today. Who knows? Who knows? How do you challenge something like that? She says she's a good friend of Smiley, and he did that for her. And there's no evidence that when he received that $300, that's what it was for. It says Rizzo testified that he showered Smiley with money, perhaps as much as $20,000 in cash, and paid for the mayor's vacation to Florida and Las Vegas, and then also the Bahamas, and they had, apparently Rizzo had tickets that he paid for these trips, and they were entered into evidence. Then it goes on to say, Smiley said he paid Rizzo back for the airplane tickets, and he denied that he accepted significant sums from Rizzo without reimbursement. Now, without reimbursement. Now, do you really believe he reimbursed him $20,000? And it says here, Rizzo also has told investigators that Smiley needed money for gambling. Well, it's interesting, the telephone records show when he was in Las Vegas, he was calling his credit union, apparently, to wire him some money or something. I wonder what that was about. Could it be he was running out of money when he was gambling? Who knows? But that's where it came from, the casino to the credit union, and then whatever went back. Spangler said Rizzo told her she would be deeded the lot to hide the fact that it was intended to be given to Abby. She said she agreed to be the middleman, having the property transferred to her and then later to Abby. And it was only a couple of days later that happened. But anyway, when you hear, what's going on and Smiley's involvement, he's talking about, gee, I gave that money to some woman, and he brings in some woman half scared to death today, apparently, to testify to that. Again, she didn't know. She just came in to testify that he had given her some money to pay a bill at one time. And I guess you're supposed to assume that was the $300. Who knows? Who knows? This stuff looks like more like a Keystone politician. It'd be laughable if the matter was not so serious. Now we have another guy that's mentioned here that testified that really is someone you have to really wonder about. This is another Keystone testifying with, in my opinion, marching orders, when you listen to him, I'm sure to do anything he can to help Abby when he's testifying. Because listen what he says here. It's almost ludicrous, but anyway, no, this is it here. Guy by the name of Majors, Jeff Majors, who was the Public Works Director during some of this time. And it says this, Councilman Jeff Majors, a former Public Works Director and the city consultant, said Abby called him and asked him to meet with Rizzo about Pebble Creek. Majors was in charge of creating a special assessment district, which they wanted to create for them, which would give Rizzo quite a bit of money that he wouldn't have to put up himself. Major, who was appointed to the council late last year, said when Pebble Creek went before the city council in 2003 under another man's name, he did not volunteer information that Rizzo was really the one behind the development. Well, listen to this. Rizzo had testified earlier this week that Abby instructed him to conceal that he was the true developer of Pebble Creek to make it go more smoothly when it went before the city council. Major said if he had been asked, he would have told the council members that Rizzo was one who was going to develop Pebble Creek. But he said he was never asked. Now, we told you on this program, and we showed you the documentations, the minutes of the meeting, and this was testified to this morning by Lori Tennant, who was an opponent of Rizzo throughout her tenure on the city council, and questioned the relationship of Rizzo and people like Abby and Smiley, and it appears that there is some merit in what she was concerned about. But she testified today, and we showed you this, we've been on this thing 2-3 years, and telling you this was happening. And we showed you some minutes from a meeting in which was being held for the public to voice their opinion of the project, Pebble Creek project. And it says that Majors was at a meeting in which Councilwoman Tennant at that time says, where is the person that owns this property? Why isn't he here to ask for this special assessment that he wants? He had never appeared, and she wanted to know where he was. Now, he said he wasn't asked. Well, wasn't that the time for the Public Works Director sitting there hearing city council people themselves, not only Tennant but other people there, asking who was this fellow Eister that was supposed to have the property that Pebble Creek was going to be built on, when in fact it was Rizzo. He said if I was asked, I would have told him it was Rizzo. Well, he was asked, and he didn't tell him. So when he says that, he's not being truthful. Now, you have to ask yourself, can you really trust a guy to tell you the truth when he's under oath, when he violated his public duty and intentionally misled not only the council, but the public when they met in public meetings to discuss this, and they were asked about who this Eister was and who was the person that was asking for the special assessment district. This was all done to cover up for his friend, Mr. Abbey, because he says that in a newspaper this past Sunday, he says, I don't see what Abbey did wrong, but I'm a small cog in the deal. Then he says in that article, he said that he only saw Abbey once on the deal, and he wasn't a major player because that was the only time he ran into him when he brought Rizzo in. That's pretty serious, because here he's bringing in Rizzo and tells him, Majors, keep this quiet. Don't tell anybody. Because it had to be that way. Majors knew that the person who was asking, or supposedly asking, for the special assessment district was a guy named Osher. He never met him. And he brings Rizzo in to talk about the special district, which means he knew that Rizzo was the real guy. But he was told to keep it quiet. Now here's the point, the thing I'm saying here. Major said, other than Rizzo being brought into him and told that there was a secret thing, and he knew that Eister was the landowner on which the Pebble Creek was supposed to be built, and he was just a front for Rizzo. Majors knew this and never disclosed it to the public when he had these public meetings, and he was asked about the owner and where is he and why isn't he here. Had every opportunity to say Rizzo is really the owner. He didn't. He kept it quiet. But he tries to clean up Abbey by this remark. But Major said, other than that, where he come in, Abbey comes in to say, hey, we're going to push this through, but we don't want the council to know who the real owner is. That's pretty significant. He said, other than that, Abbey was not involved with the subdivision and never tried to influence him about Rizzo. He already did. He influenced him. Don't tell anybody. And Majors didn't. Then he goes on to say, well, he really doesn't know if Abbey was involved, but he was just a small cog in this thing. Here's what he says. In another article that was in last Sunday's, I don't see what Abbey did wrong, but I'm such a small cog in the deal. So either you do know or you don't know if Abbey was involved. He certainly was with regard to the special assessment district that they wanted to get for Rizzo, but had Oyster up there in front. You know, this is crazy. This guy, Majors, should be charged with willful neglect of duty. He had an obligation. He was hiding something from the council, hiding something from the public. And he says, he thinks he gets out of it by saying, well, I wasn't asked. If I was asked, I would have told him. Well, if he would have told him, if asked, he should have told him anyway, because he has an obligation. He can't trick the council and trick the public and think that's all right by not saying anything when he knows he has an obligation to say it. That's a willful neglect to do. That's a crime in Michigan. You know, but really the most outrageous, absurd testimony came from the city attorney who handled the legal issues relative to the development of Pebble Creek. As it turns out, Mr. Hamilton, who is the attorney, I'll find it here, who is the attorney for the board, or the city of Flint, I'm sorry, the city of Burton, he represented Blake Rizzo in a number of dealings with the city of Burton concerning, I guess, development of land, other developments. He represented Rizzo against the city. Now he's the city attorney, representing the city attorney with Rizzo supposedly on the other side. That's a clear conflict. His client was both Rizzo and the city of Burton. Both these clients of his, their interests were in conflict. Notwithstanding the appearance of conflict, Hamilton, while representing the city, listen to this, authorized the payment of $324,000 be paid to Rizzo to manage his own subdivision development. The cities never have done that before, city of Burton, nor any other city that I know of, or since. Developers make their money on the sale of the lots and the homes they put on those lots. Or as Rizzo did, he sold the project to another developer and made about $1 million on the deal, plus the $324,000 was a little bonus of the taxpayers' money that his own attorney authorized him to get. Now, well, you know, when you look at these things, you have to wonder, you know, why were they so arrogant? I mean, it's just outrageous that they could get away with these things and nobody say anything about it other than people like Lori Tennant. Lori Tennant, in the testimony under oath by Rizzo that he swore to in court, she was the only person in the city council, he says, that I couldn't bribe. And she was a thorn in his side throughout these things. You know, now here's Hamilton's testimony. You know, in regard to the amount of money that this special district would cost, he says, and it's really very disingenuous when he suggests the money given to Rizzo, the $325,000 from Burton Bonds for the special assessment district would be paid back to the city, giving the clear, erroneous impression that the developer Rizzo would pay it back to the city eventually, when he had to know the payback would actually come from the purchasers of the houses in the subdivision. So as it turns out, it isn't the taxpayers that Rizzo and Hamilton and those people would ultimately screw. It was the people purchasing the houses. Same difference. You know, Rizzo, you know, with these Burton Keystone politicians Abbey, LeDuc, Smiley, Bronard, Majors, and Abbey, all of them were together on these things. They all concocted a lot of this. They all lined up in support of them before meetings and things like that. You know, the result was that Rizzo left with both his hands in the Burton taxpayers' pockets, with a little help from his friends. Now, as I say, you know, this was a planned rip-off, in my opinion. Now, most of these people have not been charged with anything yet. Now, whether they will or they won't, I don't know. But whether they committed a crime or didn't commit a crime, they certainly were involved in some very sharp practices that were not in the best interest of the taxpayers of the city of Burton. You know, as you can see from the testimony of those Smiley team politicians who have been testifying, their effort is to get Smiley off, no matter what, in my opinion, or they all may be in trouble with the feds. It's going to be interesting to see what happens in this case, and if Abbey was convicted, what happens next. If he isn't convicted, it's all over with. It's all over with, but we'll see what happens. Let's move on to another subject that directly impacts our efforts to establish independent police departments free from political interference, which, if that were the case, they really want to do that, these politicians, so they can cause special consideration to be given to some of their friends. I believe most community police departments are free of this type of egregious imposition. As I said, while most police departments in the area operate independent of the politicians' whims and favoritism, there are some political bodies that haven't got the message yet. Take, for example, the Argentine community, whose governmental entity, the Township Board, has so interfered with the chief of police discipline of a politically connected cop in his department that he was forced to resign. You might remember the case. It involves an allegation that an Argentine police officer induced a female motorist to flash her breasts in exchange for his not arresting her companion motorist. The woman complied, and the passenger was let go, even though he had an outstanding bench warrant against him. We showed you a case here. The prosecutor in Genesee County said there was no crime. We showed you a case here where this exact case almost, exact facts almost, different people in Detroit, where this was done by a police officer, made a woman show her breasts, made some comments to her, and he ended up going to jail because it was an extortion. Considering extortion, he went to prison for about 6-8 years. This guy walks away. This board wants to give him back his job, knowing that he probably did this. At least the police chief told him in his mind he did it. This woman ultimately made a complaint. It was investigated by Chief Terry Van Kernen, who found the woman's allegations credible and suspended the cop. Subsequently, the township board ordered the chief to put the cop back on duty. He refused. Then the games began. Van Kuren was suspended by the board for refusing to put him back on, but while he was off on his suspension, the acting chief put the officer back on active duty. When Van Kuren came back from his suspension for not putting the officer back, the offending cop back on the force to an active duty, he resigned. He felt he had no credibility. Now, this past week we interviewed his attorney, Tom Pabst, very prominent attorney here in town, on what happened here and what is the chief's next move. Here's our interview with Mr. Pabst. Tom Pabst, who was the attorney for Terry Van Kuren, who was the police chief in Argentine Township, just recently left that position. You have a lawsuit started in that particular situation out there. You represent Terry Van Kuren. Tell us what that lawsuit is about, would you?
Well, the lawsuit is about the chief doing his job, basically, which is to protect the public, in particular women who may happen to be driving through Argentine Township. And in his doing his job of protecting them, he's being retaliated against and punished because the township officials didn't want this to come to the surface. They didn't want this incident to come to the surface.
What was the incident?
The incident was where a patrol officer stopped a woman late one night, a woman who went through a stop sign, allegedly reeked of marijuana, allegedly buzzed up on alcohol, and carrying as a passenger a nephew who had an outstanding warrant against him, meaning arrest on sight. And surprisingly, she was let go without any ticket being issued, without anything else. And her story is, the reason, and her story under oath is, the reason she was let go was because the officer said, show me 2 good reasons why I shouldn't arrest your nephew right here who's got an outstanding warrant. And, of course, he's referring to her breasts. And she exposes her breasts and shakes her breasts, as he wants her to. And then he says to her, I'd like to perform a sex act with you right now, but go ahead and take off. And let her go without a ticket whatsoever. And when this came to the chief's attention, his job, of course, is to run a straight police force and to protect women out on the road from being shaken down, by police. He's got to be disciplined. In fact, I don't want him on the force. And township officials said, well, look, we don't want you to take this, anywhere. Don't take it to the prosecuting attorney. Let's forget it. He said, I'm not going to forget it. He said, my job is to discipline officers under my charge to do things like this. And came down to the point where it got ugly. Rayvert was off. The officer was off. And then my police chief made it be known he doesn't think this guy should be back on the force. If things like this are going to happen out on the road with women. And so, under a pretextual reason, they suspended my guy, the chief, Van Kuren. And while he's off on 2 weeks suspension, the township people bring Rayvert back behind the chief's back, totally undercutting his credibility with the other police officers. And that was the last straw, basically. My chief he's basically forced out. Why is he forced out? Because he's got no credibility anymore as a police chief. The patrolman under him, if he gives him an order, I'm sure they would say to him, did you check that out with the township? Do we have to do that? He's got no credibility anymore. They totally undermine him. And what just stuns me is that they would do this to protect a police officer who's out there shaking down women on the roadway, and they would force out of his chief's position a chief who's been decorated for taking bullets in the line of duty, protecting us and other people. And because the chief is doing the right thing to protect women out there on a roadway, he has become a lightning rod and a whipping boy for these clowns, you know, who are masquerading as leaders out there in Argentine Township. It just stuns me.
Where's the case stand now? What's happened here?
It stands that it's going to go to court. It's going to go to a jury, and I predict the jury here in Genesee County is going to clear this chief's name. This is a decorated chief who's gotten a Purple Heart and been shot protecting people in the line of duty. He's got a perfect record, and he's a good, honest police officer and police chief, well-liked. And they're trying to concoct a phony story, you know, that he's anti-union, which is totally ridiculous. He's not anti-union, and he's not anti this patrol officer, Rayburn. In fact, this chief sponsored Rayburn going to the police academy. Without that sponsorship, Rayburn's not a cop. And they're trying to concoct the story that he's against Rayburn. It's absurd. You know, he's doing his job is what he's doing, and he's not being allowed to do his job, and finally he's forced out because these people out there are pretending to be police chief, and they don't have the first clue what it takes to be a good police officer, let alone a good police chief. They're playing police chief, and they're playing politics, and it's a shame that a man's career and his good name is besmirched and dragged through the mud because of these clowns. That's how I feel about it.
Here's a journal editorial when this matter came up here about 6 weeks ago. Among other things, it says this, talking about the situation in Argentine. There does seem to be validity in the wildly held notion that Van Kuren merely has tried to turn a good old boys culture into a professional police agency for Argentine, but has the misfortune to run afoul of a busybody board, and that's what it really comes down to. Incidentally, I should mention to you, Tom Papps, the attorney, represented, and we interviewed that young lady on this program that was allegedly kidnapped, abducted by a police officer, put in a car. If you recall, they came upon her and her boyfriend sitting in a parking lot behind a restaurant in which she was employed. He came in all by himself in his private car, not on duty, sped in there, had a particular interest in this girl, personally apparently, searched the car, searched her boyfriend, searched her, found no drugs of any kind, no violation of law, made her get into his car and drove off. There was a number of people there that were at some kind of a function, called the police and said this woman was just abducted. Subsequently, Papps settled the case on her behalf because the taking of the woman was clearly uncalled for. And I know that some of you are wondering what's happened to that case. Apparently, this McCarty is not on the force now, but may get his job back. No one knows for sure. But Papps already has gotten her near $40,000 for her damages and going through this terrible, horrible experience. So Papps has some very good luck in handling these cases. I think it's more than luck. I just think he's an excellent attorney. And that's why he gets these cases, and he does well for them. I'm sure you've been following the story about the near tragic explosion on the east side last week. It's a miracle that no one was killed or seriously injured. What bothers me most about this whole affair is the apparent sequence of contradictions in what residents did when they smelled gas and what consumers didn't do. Here's Channel 12's report on that incident. Can you play that, please?
After a house explodes on Flint's east side. ABC 12 first broke the story at noon and on ABC12.com. It happened just before 10 o'clock in the 1500 block of New York Avenue. That's on Flint's east side. Investigators are still trying to figure out how the vacant house exploded. 3 people were injured and taken to a local hospital. At least 2 neighboring houses were severely damaged. Nearly 20 Flint firefighters fought the flames.
We arrived on scene to all the debris in the road, the ceiling, the walls, it's all down into the basement, believe it or not. Flying glass, actually the glass was imploded it went right into the house, the neighboring houses.
Residents who live in the area say they made several phone calls to Consumers Energy regarding a gas smell. But Consumers Energy says their investigation shows no calls were placed regarding that area.
Several people were home this morning in the East Side neighborhood when that explosion took place. One man just feet away, sleeping in a bedroom right next door to where it happened. ABC 12's Don Jones is live at the scene with the story of his survival. Don?
Bill, I'm standing here on a pile of debris, all that's left of the home that was leveled here on New York Avenue on Flint's east side. Now, right next door is the home of Edward Conger, and in that bedroom, corner bedroom there, right next to the porch is where he was sleeping this morning when the explosion happened.
And I was just sitting here sleeping, and all of a sudden I woke up and all this stuff was on top of me.
Edward Conger says he never heard the blast, but when he was finally shaken out of his sleep, he knew something big had happened.
This was over my head right here. I had to push it off. I had to push it off of my head, and then I screamed for my wife because I didn't know where she was.
He was home alone. His wife was grocery shopping. His 2 children were in school. He's grateful they weren't home because their bedrooms are upstairs.
They're ruined. If they had been upstairs, I don't think they would have made it either. I don't know how I did. Look at all that glass. Why didn't someone stab me in the neck, the heart?
Conger and many of his neighbors say they could have been spared this devastation. He claims calls were made to Consumers Energy Monday after he and others smelled natural gas.
We called them from a payphone. They're trying to say we didn't call them. Other people in the neighborhood called them. A person over on Maryland smelled it 3 blocks away. I just don't understand why they didn't come out.
It's amazing Conger didn't suffer any major injuries when this explosion happened. He suffered some minor cuts and bruises. Consumers Energy say they are investigating this explosion, but as of right now, their investigation doesn't show any reports of calls about a gas smell being called from this neighborhood. From now, we are live here on Flint's East Side, Dawn.
Now, you look at that mess there. It's a hole in the ground. I'll get to that in just a minute. But, you know, these people called consumers. They did all the right things when they smelled or had the odor of gas. Consumers says, we didn't get the call. You know, could it be a cover-up that consumers doesn't want to pay a big fine by not showing up, or what? Is someone lying? You know, people's lives are in jeopardy here. You know, this is the second blast in this area that blew up a house in the last year. It happened about a block over from this blast last year. Is there something wrong out there in the gas pipe? Somebody should do something about it. Has it fallen by the wayside? You know, when you're dealing with a big company, you need a powerful person or company on the other side. And of course the mayor of Flint is powerful. He should be asking the Public Service Commission in Lansing that controls all these public utilities. He should ask them to come in and investigate and find out who's telling the truth and get the problem corrected. Now there's a little battle going on now also inside the administration, the Flint mayor's administration. Listen to this. You saw the hole in the ground? the DPW director, Department of Public Works, doesn't think that the home should be classified for an emergency demolition. You know, the opposite is, he thinks apparently it can be repaired. Now the importance here is, here we have debris all over the place. Can you reconstruct that house? That's ridiculous. The mayor is really upset. He went out there and looked at it and said, this place is gone. Just should be demolished. Should be filled in. Move on. Try to reconstruct this. See, if you declare emergency demolition, classified emergency demolition, it can be cleaned up right now. There's debris 3 blocks away. Debris all over the streets. And while you take a position, DPW takes a position that you can reconstruct this house, nothing is done because there's going to be a hearing in April to decide this. But the mayor's out there saying, this is emergency demolition. And I want it out now. I want this cleaned up. I want the streets cleaned up. Well, we're going to see who runs the city of Flint here in the next week or two. Mayor Williamson or the DPW director? Well, the people on the east side deserve better. And you saw on that tape that there was people that were, just by the grace of God, weren't killed. Debris all over, and it's still there. Because the DPW director says it shouldn't be classified as an emergency demolition site. The mayor says it should be. Like I said, let's find out who runs the city of Flint. I have another subject I want to talk to you about next week. I didn't get to, and I know you've seen this. Yout Siamese cats bite worth $122,000. You know, some people saying, man, how does somebody get $122,000 for a cat bite? But when you hear what happened, what the implications were, what the results were of that cat bite, I think you'll understand. In the meantime, hopefully we'll see you next week. We'll be at the White Horse.